Well, you know, the engine manufacturers recommend a drive inspection. You'll see it on your estimates that we send you for the winter work is an IO inspection. That stands for inboard outboard. So I just wanted to take a minute and show you what this entails and what we're doing and what we're looking for. In this particular case, we've already got the Sterndrive off the back of the boat. So we've unbolted it. There's a couple other small things that we have to do to get it to this point. Now we're going to take and we're going to drain the gear oil, and we're going to change it, of course. We're not going to put the old stuff back in. That would be foolish. But we're looking to see if there's any water or contaminants, or a worst case scenario would be metal parts. The drain plug that's on the lower part of the drive has a magnet on it. So if there's anything going on bad in there, when we pull it out, it'll have a little Christmas tree, which tells us we need to look farther. So that's the first part of it. The next step is in the back on the transom plate that you see here, there's a large bearing in there. It's called a gimbal bearing. This input shaft goes through that bearing. So whenever the motor's running, that bearing is turning, as well as these universal joints. So as you would suspect, we're going to check those as well to make sure they're free, they're limber, and they're in good shape. Okay? Now we have experience. We see a lot of these, so we know the difference between a good one and a bad one. One of the most important things that we do when we do this drive inspection is to lubricate this input shaft. It's a special grease. It's very viscous. It's very thick. It's sticky. This male shaft goes into the female coupler on the back of the boat. Now, the reason the lubrication is so important is not just to get it on and off, but every time you turn this shaft, because of the distance of these U-joints, it's going out and in. So there's a wear point on this factor, on the coupler. The shaft is made of steel, the couplers are made out of aluminum. So it's designed to not tear this up. Something's got to give if something bad happens. So that's part of the inspection itself. The other thing that we're going to check is we're going to check the alignment between the gimbal bearing and the actual coupler itself. This tells us if we've had engine mounts that have relaxed and gotten out of alignment, because if it's gotten out of alignment, that coupler will fail very quickly. What is that grease that we use that I mentioned that's so sticky and it's very viscous so it won't come off? Well, this is called extreme grease. We cut the tubes off so we can stick it in. What we don't use is this. This wouldn't work very long. This is water-based. First time it gets wet, it's gone. We use this tool. It's by the engine manufacturers. Mercruiser has one, and so does Volvo. They're pretty close, but they're a little bit different. Obviously, you use the right one. But basically, we insert this inside the gimbal bearing, and what we're looking to do is push it in. It should go in nice and easy. Now, a lot of technicians, they check them by spinning them, but the reality of it, that's not how you check them. It should be able to go out and in without very much pressure whatsoever. That tells us that bearing is in alignment with that coupler, which is going to extend the life of the coupler. So we talked about the engine coupler. This is the part that mounts to the back of the engine. It bolts on the main crankshaft right behind the flywheel. Inside of here is what I was talking about, is where those splines are located. They're down in here. They're typically an inch or so long, and that input shaft goes in the back. The one that you see here is about to fail. The splines are sharp, they're pointed, they're almost like a razor. So it wouldn't be long, probably within the next 20 hours of use, this one's going to fail. This one right here that you see, this one has failed. There's no splines. It had reached the point where they stripped out completely. What that means is the boat doesn't move. The engine runs, everything's good, you put it in gear, the boat goes no place. On certain models, like a Mercruiser Alpha, your cooling water pump is located in the drive. Not only will it not move, but the engine will overheat. But you can see this is a critical component. So checking these, lubricating those shafts, making sure they're lined is a really important thing to do. So I mentioned the gimbal bearing, that bearing that supports that input shaft that goes into the back of the coupler. This is a closer look at it. This is one that's failed. The bearing itself, it's got ball bearings in here, they're sealed. But you can see this one, the housing that actually supports the bearing, it broke, it cracked, so this bearing actually came out of its location and wasn't supporting that shaft. So that was a problem. One of the other points of inspection when we do an IO examination, we check these guys right here. This, and then this right here, but these are called anodes. They're there to protect the drive from galvanic corrosion. We have a stainless steel propeller, aluminum housing on both the drive and on the back of the boat. So these are sacrificial anodes. They're designed for them to go away if we have galvanic potential versus the expensive drive. That's another video for another time. We'll get more into detail on that. So we're going to take a good look at those. The other thing that we check, especially on twins, is we make sure that we don't have a lot of play in this steering. We do this by taking these trim rams and pushing them back and forth. If there's a lot of play in there, we need to discover why that is. We may have a pin, a steering pin that's worn. We may have even a steering cable that's come loose. But we shouldn't have a lot, so we're going to look into it. This could be a dangerous thing, so we want to make sure that we find it. So one of the things that we definitely want to check are the bellows. This is an example of an exhaust bellows here. They're like an accordion, because as you go up and down, they stretch. There's another one up top that's larger that shaft and the universal joints go through. This is a Mercruiser. There's a smaller one down here for the shift cable. We'll take a closer look at those in just a minute. Side of the gimbal ring, this is called a gimbal ring. There's two senders. This one on this side is what controls your trim gauge. As it goes up and down, it shows the position of the drive. On the other side, on a Mercruiser, it has what's called a trim limit. It'll only let it come up so far before it stops, so you don't over trim and lose your steering. We're going to check the wires that come into these to make sure they're not deteriorated or corroded. There's also a hose in here that goes to a gear oil replenishment check valve right here. We're going to check that, make sure that's in good shape. And then there's also a water hose on the other side that goes from the bell housing here into the engine. That's what feeds the water up for the engine. So we're going to make sure those aren't rotten or deteriorated or cracked. So let's take a closer look at some of these things. Since they're not on the bell housing and the gimbal ring, you can get a closer look. Here's one of the bellows that I was talking about. And you would ask, well, how do they fail? Well, they're made out of rubber, and as they stretch, go back and forth, and they're in the water, what can happen is they dry rot through time, and then they can crack and they can leak. If this one, this big one, this is the one that you couldn't see that I talked about, if this one leaks, it's going to put water inside the boat and potentially could sink your boat. But it's not going to be good even if it doesn't sink it. You're going to get water in starters and in other components. So that's why we inspect this one. Now there's a smaller version of this right below that the exhaust goes through. If that one fails, that's okay as far as getting water in the boat. But here's what happens. When the exhaust one fails, now we have hot exhaust coming up on this one, because when you're running, this is not in the water no more. This is in the air, okay, because it's the way the boat's designed. So that hot exhaust is going to cause this one to fail sooner. The shift cable one, that's another one that if it fails, puts water in the boat and be a bad thing. One of the things that I didn't mention, because I really didn't have a way to show it to you, is these little guys right here. They're called boot heels, at least that's what we call them. What they are, they're exhaust check valves. So when the engine's running, these exhaust check valves, they open and let the exhaust out. If the engine stalls, or if you're backing your boat in on the trailer too fast, these go this way and they cut off the water flow from coming back up into the exhaust and damaging the engine. Now this one here, obviously you can see is damaged. If we find this in the exhaust cavity and when we pull it, it tells us two things. The motor's been overheated, because the water is what keeps these from deteriorating. And obviously that protection that I talked about is no longer there, so we're going to have to go replace these. These can be very important, so we look for those as well. So one of the last things I want to talk about, we already mentioned, was the anodes, the ones that we showed you earlier. They were in pretty good shape. These are some that our technicians pulled off that have deteriorated. They're in various degrees of deterioration. The fact that they're all damaged and eaten up like this, that's okay. That means it's doing their job. These guys sacrificed their life to protect that expensive Sterndrive and the gimbal ring and all that. So here's an interesting one. This one goes around the prop shaft. So if you want to guess what this is fishing line. Fishing line, because the propeller's turning when people fish and they cut that little piece off, they don't know what to do with it, so they look around, they throw it overboard. This wraps around the prop shaft, and there's a seal that seals the oil in and water out into the Sterndrive. If you turn your Sterndrive into a fishing reel by wrapping this on there, it'll damage that seal, the oil can drain out, and then you end up buying a $8,000 to $9,000 Sterndrive. It's a very expensive repair. So obviously we look for this. It's pretty much right there. If we feel that it's caused a problem, or if we find water in the drive, then we put a pressure check on the drive where we pressurize it at a low PSI, see if it holds it. If it does good there, then we put a vacuum test on it, which we actually try and pull air in. From that, that'll tell us which seals possibly could be leaking. Hopefully now you've got a good understanding of this work that we charge you for, and what we're trying to do is not spend your money, but save your money.